Next oscillator that I want to talk about is called momentum waves, and we've dealt with two different varieties of market cipher B. The first one was called VWAP, the second one was called money flow, and the third one is called momentum waves. Basically, momentum waves, as the name suggests, represent the very momentum backing an asset. First of all, we dealt with VWAP, which was a velocity weighted average price. It has its different functions that affects the direction of price. Then we went to liquid, which was for money flow. It also has its different function pertaining to the very direction of price. Now we're dealing with what we call momentum waves, which also has a different function in terms of determining the very direction of price. Momentum waves is made up of two different waves. It's made up of two different waves. The first one is a light blue wave, and the second one is a deep blue wave. As you can see on this chart, the first one, which is a light blue wave, is what you see here. This is the light blue wave. It normally intersects inside the deep blue wave, and it goes down and down and down and down. And when it reaches the peak or the tail of the intersection, it crosses within. It goes up, up again. Again, these are all directions. These are all directions. And the deep blue wave also moves along and also crosses. So it intercedes along the line, intersects along the line, sorry. And anytime there's an intersection, it prints what we call an indicator. Normally it does print, but for now we are going to deal with how it affects the direction of price. Momentum, as the name suggests, is like your engine. This is how I would describe VWAP. VWAP is basically like my table, and money flow obviously is my liquid, and momentum was more or less like my momentum. And a typical example here is anytime we see momentum crossing up onto the positive territories, you could realize that price was heading towards the uptrend. Then price started falling down when the intersection began between the deep and the light blue wave. The price fell again. Price also fell from the side, and price did again went into the negative territories, and again the light blue wave intersected the deep blue wave and headed towards the upward territories. You can realize that price was heading towards upward territories, and again the intersection began. Price headed downwards. You can realize that price headed downwards. So you can realize that all of these oscillators has different varieties, different functional abilities, which affects the very direction of price. Like I said, they move all the time. The first one we talked about was VWAP. VWAP moved, money flow also moves, and now momentum wave is also moving. So we've now dealt with three different varieties of different oscillators or waves, which has different functional abilities in terms of determining the very direction of price. So the question here is, what will you look at when you're trading? Are you looking at spots, or are you looking at indicators, or are you purposely looking at oscillators? We have three different oscillators right now having a direct influence on price, and all has different functional abilities. And the question I ask again is, what do you look at? Do you look at indicators first, or do you look at oscillators? Obviously the critical answer will be oscillators, because oscillators moves in accordance with time, and time has been always very critical in trading. The next video we're going to deal with time frames, and we are going to highlight on every time and how time affects trading. For now, we just dealt with momentum waves, and momentum waves again functions as your engine of a vehicle, and money flow also works as your liquid, and VWAP now works as your turbo. So we have three powerful structures, three powerful oscillators, all helping in our trading decisions, and all has different functional abilities, helping us to decide how our trading is going to be. And these are all directional algorithms. So how do I use them to trade? This is how market cipher becomes your best indicator or oscillator, ever in the history of mankind. This is why market cipher sets itself from the others, because it shows you how all these three powerful elements works together, and other varieties of other oscillators always works together to give you a very different or a very definitive or very accurate trading entries, because they move in direction. Again, like I told you, trading is like a journey. And the first one that we did earlier on was the indicators. These are your road signs. And after dealing with the road signs, we realized that road signs were not enough for us to do our, for us to complete our journey. So we probably employed Google Maps. So this was for our Google Maps. And under our Google Maps, we realized that we have different alternative or varieties of Google Maps that will help us in determining our that will help us literally in completing our journey. So we dealt with what we call the VWAP, which was another first form of Google Map. And we dealt with money flow, which was another different variety of a Google Map. And now we are dealing with momentum, which is another different varieties of a Google Map. So right now you can realize that we are now increasing what we call the very confluence of our direction. We are increasing options. We are increasing our options because you don't want to side on just a single data. Like I said earlier on in the very previous video, that indicators are just static algorithms and they are not enough for us to determine our trading entries. We need enough data. Like I said, we need enough data. You don't have to trade just on a single data. We need enough. So we dealt with row signs and they were not enough for us. So now we have employed Google Maps. And Google Maps, we have different varieties of Google Maps. And we dealt with VWAP, we dealt with money flow, and now we are dealing with what we call the momentum waves. And under the momentum waves, you are literally going to do another video that's going to tell us how momentum waves affect price in different ways. I'm going to describe how momentum waves works again, because momentum waves become more or less like your influential or your most influential oscillator or wave, which has enough influence or enough, again, functional influence on the very direction of price. Price responds heavily based on the very momentum, and it's critical because if you're driving a car and you don't have an engine in the car, obviously the car can't move. But you can have less liquid, which is less fluid, and still the car can move, or you can drive without a turbo and still the car can move. So momentum waves more or less represents like your very engine, which gives you more or less like the commencement of your vehicle. So momentum waves has another elements that we are going to touch, and these are very critical parts of momentum waves. Once we can establish this part, we now understand how market cipher works, and we are going to deal with how all these oscillators and how all these indicators works together in a given time frame and with regards to a given asset. So you wouldn't want to take much of your time. Like I said earlier on, it always has to be simplified. We always have to keep it simple, and with time we will now familiarize ourselves with how market cipher works overall and how powerful market cipher is. So I'll probably want to end here. Have a nice time. Peace.